Hello, everyone. Welcome to year one, which for those of you that have been here before is a podcast meant to dive deeper into the successes, the fears, the failures, the good, the bad, the ugly, everything in between about first-year ownership of an agency. I'm your host, Christian Ganey. I'm co-founder and partner at Outerkind, and we're a creative agency based here in Denver, Colorado. It's worth noting that today's show, as always, is produced and supported by Indie Agency News. And you can find out more information about them at indieagency.news. So before I introduce my guest, just a couple things. Why the heck are we here? We got a purpose, a mission, and an output. Our purpose is really to help educate people and interested parties on agency governance, leadership, and commencement. And we want to serve that agency talent that might be sitting on the sidelines thinking about a new adventure. And then lastly, the output is hopefully to inspire the audience if we do our jobs right. So thanks for being here. I guess by way of introduction, my record on this is pretty clear. I'm regularly in awe of great strategy. And I'm also a lover of fine dining, hotels, and bougie vacations. And so I'm particularly interested in our conversation with today's guest. Please welcome Josh Lane from FerebeeLane. Josh, welcome. How are you?
I'm doing great. It's wonderful to be here.
Awesome.
I was thrilled to be asked, and I love bougie vacations too.
Yeah, I mean, I don't pretend to think that you're a bougie travel agent, but I did take a scouring of your website, and I know there's a particular category of client that you typically serve, which we'll talk through. As a co-founder myself, I get asked a lot of questions about agency ownership and commencement, but perhaps the most popular is about sort of the tipping point of why I got to where I got to. And I know it's been a few minutes since you founded this agency, by my calculation, maybe 20 years and 8 months. So I'm going to test your memory here a little bit. Let's go back in time. And let's think about the moment you knew you needed to start this venture, how you did it, and sort of what that tipping point was.
So I remember it well, very well. Let's call it, you're right, this is our 20th anniversary. 22 years ago was that tipping point. So I worked at a wonderful agency that I was actually a boomerang. I worked there twice. And I was there the second time. And part of in the back of my mind, I'd always thought about, could I be the next generation of leadership at this agency? Well, they made a wonderful decision for them for a number of reasons, and they sold to IPG. And at that moment, I started to wonder, kind of, what is my path? You can do wonderful things, there and whatnot, but I wanted to have the ability to make decisions about business. I trusted my ability to make those decisions. And if they didn't work out, if I failed, I wanted to do because of my decisions, not because of somebody else. And so really 22 years ago was that tipping point. I had fortunately, at the same agency, met my business partner, Matt Ferebee, who was a writer and I'm an account person. And so for those about 2 years is when we started having conversations about what could we do, how would we do it together. And so, again, I will never forget that day, Christian.
Yeah, I mean, I think as founders, we all sort of have that moment. Mine was in my garage right behind this wall here. And so I'm glad to hear that it still resonates with you, 20 years on. You did mention, I don't know if the right terminology is co-founder, business partner, but you decided to build this with someone else. Is that right? Could you talk us through sort of what your thought process was and how important that decision was?
Yeah. So Matt's, as I mentioned, he's a writer by trade. I'm an account person. We had worked together for about 2 years. And so we saw the world, I'll say kind of, our values are very similar. We approach things a little bit differently as an account person, and a writer may do that. We shared a common appreciation and love for strategy. And so we got along really well. And I'll be honest, some people gave us advice not to have, and we have a 50-50 partnership, not to have a 50-50 partnership because you want somebody to be a tiebreaker. And because we knew each other so well and because we trust each other, we always look out for the best interest of each other. we said 50-50 would work for us. And it has never been a day to where that has ever been an issue whatsoever. But I'll tell you the other benefit of having a partner who is equal to myself is that I'm not alone. I've got somebody else to go through this with who I can talk to about anything that is going on, whether it's family and how all the work as a independent year one at the time agency owner is going through, to making decisions for the business. And that relationship between the two of us has stayed close the entire time. We actually shared an office for the first 2 or 3 years so we could have continual conversations.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's some trends that have developed over the short span of this show. And one of them is the importance of partnership, good partners, picking people you want to work with. I mean, heck, I spend more time with my partners than I do with my family in many cases. And I'm sure, Josh, that's the same with you.
100%.
And I guess, that sort of leads me to, the other question, which is what's in a name? And I think you answered that question. There's something very romantic about it harkens back to the older days or the Mad Men days of using the last names of founders, but it doesn't come across that way. Was that by design?
No, I mean, I wish I could give you a big romantic story. We were actually in business for probably 3 or 4 months, and we were going through names. I think, I don't know, and Company might've been one. There was a different one. And we just said, we've got to settle on something. And we did take the more traditional route of FerebeeLane, but I mean, it's completely us because it is completely us, but it has worked really, really well. And, we've had a couple of conversations in the past. Do we make any adjustments to it? Man, we had to make a decision and go forward. And again, it's fortunately, his name is very unique and mine is very easy to spell. And so there's some story behind it. Anyway, people used to think in the very, very beginning as FerebeeLane, are we a real estate development company? So that was the only issue that we had in the very beginning. But
hey, if that's your only issue, and as you said before we started recording, the website URL is available, I think that's win-win. Let's get on to the next step. But I do want to get into the work in just a little bit, but I have one other question that I think the audience would appreciate is, you mentioned trusting partnership. You mentioned you're not alone and you've got that partner that can, understands the situation that you're in and vice versa. I wonder if there was ever a point in that first, let's say 12 months of existence where you were questioning your decision or, sort of there was a moment where you really had to fight through something and if there was, if you could share that.
Sure. Man, in that first year, there were only 2 moments. One was there's a point of personal pride, never to miss payroll, even if it was just for Matt and myself. And we both had young families. So when I left to start the agency with Matt, gosh, I think our daughter was 20 months old. My wife had just left the job that she was at, and we had a 2-month-old. And Matt was in a very similar situation. And there was one time to where I thought we were going to miss payroll. Again, payroll was just reporting back to our wives, who are the most important. And fortunately, that check showed up literally hours before they expected to see those checks. And that was one moment where I may get to a little later, has really shaped how we've run this agency, never to be in that situation. The other part was, by working at a holding company, by working at a larger agency, I was fortunate to work with some really large brands, had great budgets, doing some really interesting work. And that first year, man, we started off, fortunately, with a great client that gave us a small retainer. But we were trying to add on some other smaller clients, and they were small, Christian. They were real small, and they didn't understand advertising. And we were doing things for like $1,500, $500. And at that moment, I'm like, man, is this what it's going to be about? Am I always going to work on these super small, unsophisticated? They don't really care because I'm just chasing after this dollar. And I talked to Matt about it. I'm like, we've got to push forward and try to figure out what our approach is, what our positioning is, and start working with people who really appreciate the value that we can bring. And so it wasn't a questioning of, did I make a wrong decision? It was more of, we've got to try to make something happen here, because neither of us want to continue to work with some of the, I don't want to call them brands, some of the local small clients that you just hoped the paycheck would, or the check would show up the next day, and you didn't really care about what you were doing.
Yeah. And that can be super stressful. I love that you guys drew a line in the sand with payroll. And I think it's, it maybe isn't as concerning today, but it probably still as important. And I know that, that's a thread that can run through your agency in terms of culture. Let's pivot just for a second, because I was struck by the work when I dug into your background and the agency. I mean, I think there's certainly a vibe and a construct that people get when they go to your website. We work on, very, I would say, high touch, luxury oriented brands, regardless of the category. And I guess I'm curious, when a client brief comes to you, especially given your varied skill sets, how do you go about deciding which tactical element you're going to sort of dive into? Like, how do you know it's positioning versus copywriting versus experiential versus product marketing or above the line content? How do you go through that process for your clients?
Well, I mean, so it depends upon where they're at. And so we always start, and again, I'm going to use words that we all use, and I hope that we all employ. We are always strategy led, and we have some clients come to us that know who they are. They have a clear understanding of what their perspective is, what the unique value is they provide to the market, to the affluent consumer. But then they need help in certain areas to reach whatever objective they're trying to reach. And then we'll go in a dialogue with them to help understand, is experiential exactly where they need? Is it a social strategy? And then content development is what they need. What we have, I'll say, what we're becoming more known for are brands that either don't know exactly who they are, or they are trying to reinvent themselves for the affluent consumer. And that's who we deal with a lot, is the affluent consumer. And so many times that starts us off on a place to where we are doing now, I would say probably 80% of our engagements start with some form of positioning for that brand. And then what we often say is, as a part of that positioning process, the collaborative work that we do together, we will help determine what the next right steps are together to build out that ongoing marketing plan. We never go in with very specific, it's going to be a traditional advertising campaign or a digital campaign or whatever it is. It's what are your business goals? What are your objectives? What is your brand saying about the positioning, about the direction that we should go in, so we can communicate that and amplify that experience to the consumer. So again, always starts with the positioning. Occasionally, brands know exactly who they are, but what we're finding out more and more coming at us to say, we knew who we were, but we don't know who we are today. So help us.
Yeah. And I guess just building on that, did you always believe that you had a specific skill set that would speak to an affluent audience or affluent brands? Or was that something that emerged over several years where that became, I'll say, a niche or a focus point for you guys?
It emerged. So Matt's background is in high-end furniture, being from North Carolina. Two of our first 4 clients, one was or is still Le Creuset Cookware. So they've been a client for 18 years of the 20.
Wow.
And then Blackberry Farm, which is one of the most beloved small luxury hotels in the world, is also a client. It's been a client for 18 years. And that, along with furniture, really started to form our perspective on the affluent consumer. What I would say is, now 20 years in, Matt and I waited too long. And this is a piece of advice I would give is it was probably year 15 before we really started to lean into premium and luxury brands and the affluent consumer. I think we could have done it more around year 7, year 8, after we had that experience, and we were messing around trying to figure out, what do we do? How do we talk about ourselves? And finally, again, we just got to this point that we had to make a decision about what we're going to focus on.
And that's a really interesting point, just from my own personal experience. I think, especially when you start, you were talking about some of these lower paying clients or, local businesses. you're trying to keep the lights on. You're trying to make payroll, right? And so if it's affluent or not, you're like, if I can prove value, I mean, obviously that's got to be a part of it, then I don't particularly care what category that serves. And I think agencies actually, to our discredit, are really slow to really razor focus us in like, this is our lane, as opposed to, well, our lane is really everywhere. And I think there's a lesson there to be learned for anyone who's sitting on the sidelines to think through that it can be done sooner. I often think the same thing about ourselves. I guess there's a lot of sameness in our industry and agency speak. And I wonder, you've touched on it maybe a little bit, and maybe you've already answered this, so apologies. But, is there one thing that your agency does you think better than anyone else that is sort of a stamp from FerebeeLane?
Yeah, gosh, I won't be very humble to say better than anyone else. But what I will say is, I think, and I give a lot of credit to Matt to this, I think digging in, understanding what the unique value of brand provides to its market and being able to articulate that in a way that inspires and aligns an internal audience to ultimately deliver on it from an operational, and we do a lot of operationalizing of the brand in order to bring it to life, because we'll tell clients this. We can help craft the narrative and amplify it through advertising and marketing activities, but if you don't deliver on it in the experience, then it's going to go away really quickly and people aren't going to believe it. So allow us to help. And so we do a lot of collaboration with interior designers, with architects, to try to make sure the experiential component of it, whether it's a hotel or a destination or a retail environment, delivers upon that. And so whether we do it better than anybody else, we do it better than, I imagine, the large majority. And we do it in a way that I think really inspires people and gets people really, really excited about their own brand and then how to bring that to life.
You're a very humble man, Mr. Lane. I like that approach. Before we get to perhaps my favorite segment called Agency Rapid Fire, or ARF, which desperately needs a new acronym. So what, I know it's been over 20 years. You're a different guest in the sense that it wasn't yesterday, it was 20 years ago. Yep. But there's people sitting on the sidelines, maybe listening to this, that are at a major holding company or have a group of friends and colleagues that they could see themselves starting a business with. What would you say to them as they sit on the sidelines to think about before they take that leap?
Well, to think about before they take that leap, they need to understand why they're doing it. What is their long-term vision? Do they have patience to get there? We often talk about how committed are you to controlling the controllables? And, there are certain things that are beyond our control. But when both Matt and I started this, again, you hear, and this is why a lot of independent agencies start businesses, is to control. And what we wanted to do is we wanted to run this business in such a way to where we can maintain control for as long as we are in control. And that gets into a very unsexy subject that doesn't often get talked about. But it has to do, you have to understand your relationship to debt, because the more debt that you take on, the less control that you have in the choices that you want to make and the decisions that you want to make for your company. And that's one thing that we've always really, really held firm, is that whatever debt we may or may not take on, we lose a little bit of choice as a result of taking that on. And we've been really, 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 really diligent about keeping an eye on that. I met with a individual who was thinking about starting his own agency. And he told me, he's like, Josh, I can't start it unless I have at least $750,000. I'm like, what are you talking about? What world are you living in? If that's the case, then clearly maybe you need a little more control on how you spend and how you grow. But I mean, that would be the advice. I mean, ultimately, what are you doing this for? What is your long-term vision? Yeah. And then everything else will be aligned.
I love that. I had no vision for the future. I didn't know a lot about debt. And I think somehow, some way, maybe my business partners were the ones that sort of shouldered some of that load. But that's great advice nonetheless. Cool. So I'm going to rapid fire some questions to you. The idea behind this is just first thing that comes to mind, because I think those are the spirited, more creative answers that come, and then we'll wrap it up. Okay. Agency rapid fire. Biggest myth about running your own agency is what?
Man, I don't know if it's a myth, but the first thing is that it's easy. And maybe that's clearly not a myth. But it is the number of decisions that you have to make. And I guess when I look out of my office now, and we've got just about 40 people, it is, and sorry, I'm going off on a tangent here, and it's not rapid fire, but ultimately I'm looking at it's about 150 people depending upon us every single day to deliver. And that's the myth that when you start your own thing, it's only you and your business partner, your partners, man, but it's so much bigger than that.
Yeah, don't think about that very often. Mine is you're your own boss and you get lots of time off. Those two things are also biggest myths. All right, second, book, podcast, or person that helped you the most in your first year.
I don't even know if they had podcasts back in 2005, Christian.
Probably not. See, you're an unusual guest, Josh.
That's right. So I think this feeds our philosophy. The name of the book and the author's escaping is called Trading Up. And it gets at a consumer psychology about no matter how much money you have, there are certain categories that are incredibly important to you, and that you will trade up. You will spend a disproportionate amount of your income in that category. And that really shaped our view of premium brands and affluent consumers.
Hardest part about leading creatives is what?
Trying to make them understand what the client is going through and why what they may be asking sounds ridiculous. And sometimes it is. But many times there is an emotional reason or a challenge internally. And if we look at it from a different way, we can still do the work that's needed in a way that they can hear it, in a way that they can buy it.
Sounds like empathy. I love it.
100%.
All right. So last one, what's your we made it moment, or what will it be in your opinion?
So I have two. One we have not achieved yet. The first one happened for both Matt and I probably 2 years ago. And that is when my wife and I have two kids. He and his wife have two kids. When they all four of them graduated from high school and college was essentially taken care of, that's when we both said, okay, from a personal responsibility to family, we've done this. We've taken care of a family, and whatever happens from here, we'll be good. The second one is, and I'm not afraid to say this, we want to win Small Agency of the Year. That's
you shouldn't be afraid to say that. Yeah.
We have not accomplished that yet, and there's some work that we've got to do, and that is a big goal. Not that it defines how good we are, but it's going to push us to try to achieve a different level.
I don't know a human. Yeah, I've never met a human that didn't like a little personal or professional recognition. So I think that's a worthy objective. Josh, as I said already twice, you are an unusual guest in that you've just hearkened back to 20 years ago. I think the lessons you've shared today are super helpful for those that are sitting on the sidelines. I've learned a lot and really appreciated your time today. Thanks so much for being here.
I enjoyed it and happy to talk to anyone if they ever want to talk about it.